The state of monarchy is the supremest thing upon earth. For kings are not only God's lieutenants upon earth, and sit upon God's throne, but even by God himself they are called gods. That is a quote from King James I, the man largely credited with what we know to be the King James Version of the Bible. In today's video, I'm going to make a connection between medieval Europe and Antarctica. And I know this is a very strange place to start. I'm sure a lot of you are scratching your heads. You're going to have to stay with me through this because it goes through politics and it goes through history and it shows something very clear about what's happening in the world today. Stay tuned. The first place we have to stop is here. It's called divine right theory. The belief that God created the state and that God had given those of royal birth divine power to rule. The people were bound to obey their ruler as they would God. To disobey the divine right of kings was considered both treason and a moral sin, or more commonly known as heresy. The most powerful man that ever lived was Pharaoh. I know this is a Hollywood representation, but it's the idea that a man can be imbued with the powers of a god, and therefore have divine right to rule. There's a great website I'll give you a link to called The Mad Monarchist, and this guy talks about monarchs through history and how it is just as easy for a king to become corrupt and cause problems as it is for those brought to power through mob rule. There's virtually no difference. Heretic. Someone who has an opinion that is opposite to or against the official or popular opinion. Some examples here. He complained that anyone who challenges an assumption about global warming gets branded a heretic. I'm sure a lot of you know what heresy is. It's largely been used in terms of medieval Europe and Christian history. But the idea is this. If you say or do anything that goes against the theology or philosophy of the day, you are a heretic. Now, many of you would understand the parallel between this and what's going on in the cyber world with YouTube, with Twitter, with Instagram. They are ostracizing heretics through all of these integrity policies, whether it's the election integrity policy or the vaccine hesitancy policy or whatever. Basically, they are just employing the exact same tactics. During medieval times, if you even had associations with someone labeled a heretic, you were persona non grata. You could not be dealt with. You could not be someone you could purchase things from or sell things to. You were outcasts in society. That's the idea. Anybody who spoke against the king, anybody who spoke against the powers that be or the authorized beliefs of the day, even Protestants at one time were seen as heretics. Now, I'm sure a lot of you are still scratching your heads. How does this take us to Antarctica? Well, the National Center for Science and Education's definition of scientific fact. In science, an observation that has been repeatedly confirmed and for all practical purposes is accepted as true. Truth in science, however, is never final, and what is accepted as fact today may be modified or even discarded tomorrow. This has happened over and over and over and over again, not only throughout the history of science, but the history of religion, the history of politics, the history of philosophy. Everything is exactly as it should be, right up into the point that it is proven completely and totally wrong. The difference between societies that call themselves free and ones that were labeled historically as tyrannical is the governments that took the science of the day and turned it into a weapon. And that is what's happening today, right now, online. Even on this platform, now. The woman on the left, Crystal Ball, she's with this outfit called Rising. Her, and I'll give you a link to this too, and her co-host here, Cigar and Jetty, are talking about how they believe the New York Times has gone too far by declaring war on Twitch streamers because a very few people went to Twitch and started talking about things that were now in the modern theology, the modern philosophy, not allowed. And the guy on the right says, well, look, I don't agree with their opinion, but who are these platforms to go after them no matter wherever they're at and silence any kind of thought, no matter how crazy it is? We're getting to Antarctica. I know this is a long way to get there, but it's the idea that there is a group of people, Washington, D.C. and New York, who believe and have believed for a long time that they are the supreme powers on Earth and that they control the most powerful military on Earth. Therefore, if they control those who are in charge in Washington, they are now, in effect, the most powerful supreme rulers and leaders of the planet. That's what they believe. And that's why they believe they have the authority to do what they're doing. You see, Crystal Ball here, and I forgot to mention this, has had an experience in her life with this power being brought to bear against her. 10 or 11 years ago, some pictures came out. She actually was running for office in Virginia that were, by modern standards, somewhat tame, but a little racy. And they decided to cancel her way back then because of these pictures. She makes the allegation that the reason YouTube and all these other platforms are doing this is because they don't want the New York Times to write horrible stories about their platforms and what they're allowing and who's saying what, therefore causing their stock price to decrease. That it's all about the money. And she's absolutely right about this. And I'll let you listen to this. It's only an 8-minute segment, but they nail it completely now. Focus. This is the most important part of the video. Washington, D.C. and New York believe they have ruled the planet and are in charge of the planet and everyone's authorized belief systems. Period. No one is more powerful than they are. They control everything. This is their arrogance. And if they can control the men who are sat in those seats, they in essence don't have any accountability. They can just hang it on whoever that they put in the chair. And this belief system has worked its way down into their primary attack dogs, the media. Tucker Carlson thinks intelligence agencies should worry more about quote-unquote aliens. Now, this is where the accepted science part comes in. You see, they can't comprehend the idea that perhaps there are powers on this planet beyond them. They, of course, have to come from somewhere in outer space. That's why they refer to them as aliens. They couldn't possibly come from the deep oceans. They couldn't possibly come from Antarctica, because what does accepted theological science say? Accepted theological science says that Antarctica is completely uninhabited and our deep oceans are just vast deserts of salt water that nothing could possibly exist in. And based on that belief, they have set themselves up as the most powerful entities on the planet in their own minds. Right down to Tucker Carlson. Who remembers the video of Sandra Smith back in November saying, "What's going on? We called it." It was the perfect analogy. It was the perfect example of how powerful these people believe they are. They cannot come to any kind of a grip that science could be wrong. even though it's been proven wrong over and over and over and over again, usually about every 100 years throughout history. The idea that there could be a civilization so advanced that they could exist under the ice, they could travel through our oceans as if they were traveling through air, and that we would be powerless to do anything about it. And that is what Tucker Carlson said. That's what started me down this road for this video. See, he's afraid that they could be powerless to do anything about it. And that's what has him worried. That is the heresy. The heresy of powerlessness. There's no way they should ever be seen as powerless against anyone or anything. And if anybody would rise up and challenge the power of Washington, D.C., they need to be gotten rid of. Anyone who challenges the authority of Washington, D.C. needs to be gotten rid of. That's how you know who you're dealing with and what you're dealing with. If you believe in voting, you believe in anarchy. Democracy leads to anarchy, which is mob rule, and I will leave with this. The tendency of liberals is to create bodies of men and women of all classes, detached from tradition, alienated from religion, and susceptible to mass suggestion mob rule. I would say alienated from faith, really. And a mob will be no less a mob if it is well-fed, well-clothed, well-housed, and well-disciplined. Fact. I don't think anyone could look at our government, the situation going on today online, and say it is any less corrupt or less evil than what was going on in ancient Rome, or what was going on even under King George, or Pharaoh. Absolutely no difference. The state of monarchy is the supremest thing on earth. For kings are not only God's lieutenants upon earth and sit upon God's throne, but even by God himself they are called gods. Say this today and you are branded a heretic. Speak against this 400 years ago and you were branded a heretic. Which is right? King James created the Bible as we know it today. So which is it? This is the real key to why Antarctica people are blind to. People don't want to see it. People don't want to even consider the fact that Washington, D.C. or New York are not the supreme powers on earth. Or that man, as we know him to be, is not the supreme power on earth. God bless. Have a great weekend. Like, share, subscribe, and we'll see you next time.